Hi, I'm Molly Matthews. Welcome to Job IQ. We're talking today with Ann McDaniel about career outside the box. Hi, Ann.
Hi, Molly.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to hear a little bit about your career. Tell me what you did first, what were you trained for, and what was your first career?
Well, I started out as a journalist, largely because when I was in college, I couldn't quite figure out what to do, and journalism sort of fit my. I'm a nosy person. I like to know what's going on, and I thought FBI agent or journalist both would work for those two things, and I ended up going to the Dallas Times-Herald, which is a newspaper that no longer exists, but it was the afternoon paper in Dallas at the time.
And I know this about you, and you're humble, so I will say you moved up to very senior positions in the journalism world.
I did. I went from the Dallas Times-Herald. After 7 years, I went to Newsweek, and I started as a correspondent at Newsweek and moved through the ranks there from covering law and justice department and then covering the White House and moving on to doing editing and really management of reporters. There aren't many people in journalism who care a lot about how to make the place work and run on time, and the people do have a better working situation. I really cared about that. I really liked that as much as I liked both the news and that, and I looked for ways to combine those in my jobs. And I was lucky. I got to go all over the world on the company's dime. I was able to be front and center for a lot of first drafts of history, meet people like Mikhail Gorbachev and other world leaders.
And you did talk shows, and you did...
I did a fair amount of television and radio during the time, talking about whatever news events were happening and what our analysis of it was. So I had a lot of fun.
Then you moved to management.
I did. I was. I really enjoyed it, but as I said, I wanted to combine these two things. Newsweek offered me an opportunity to take on a role that was called Chief of Correspondence, which was managing all the reporting. Reporting was my real passion. Some people are more writers as journalists, some people are more reporters. I was more of a reporter. So I took on that role, and then over the next 7 years, went from being the Chief of Correspondence through several other iterations, and I was the managing editor of the magazine, which is the #2 slot. I shared that. I had a co-managing editor also. At the time, I did that for 7 years, and then began to think that I loved this. It was incredible. I had had so much fun, but I was 45, and I knew that I knew I had a lot more working years, and I wasn't sure that there would be enough more interesting and fun things to do. And I was traveling a lot for the job. I was commuting a lot, and between New York and Washington. And opportunity was presented to me within the same company. The Washington Post company owned Newsweek, and the Washington Post company, the then chairman and CEO, Don Graham, came to me and said, would you be interested in making the switch fully from journalism to 100% on the business side and coming to work for the corporation and help all the companies run. And fortunately, he gave me a long time to make up my mind, because the first time it was mentioned, I really thought, why would they send the chairman of the company to run me out of this place? Like, why would I want a desk job? I have this really fun, exciting journalism role. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, wait, here's a chance. Maybe it is a good idea to do something completely different. And so I started exploring those opportunities and eventually made the switch.
So
I did that for 15 years. And then I decided that maybe I was ready to do it a little less full-time. So I am a media consultant today, media business consultant, and a board member on different nonprofit and corporate boards. But I continue a relationship with what is now called Graham Holdings Company, because we sold the Washington Post. But I continue to work with them on different projects they have.
You told me that family and friends didn't think it was going to work.
Well, when they didn't think it was going to work was primarily when I went from journalism from
okay.
Newsweek into the Washington Post company, the corporate job.
I see.
Everyone advised me against
It's like
it.
going to the dark side.
It was exactly like going in. If you're a
Yeah.
journalist, you think you're in the noble side and the
Right.
business
Right.
people are the dark
Dark
side.
side, yeah.
And nobody could understand why I would want to do this. And I kept thinking and wrestling. I listened to what everybody told me.
Yeah.
But I kept thinking about it and kept thinking, no, I think it could be pretty interesting. And it's what's the worst that could happen? That was my constant question to myself. And the worst that could happen was I'd completely fail at it. And there was a significant risk of that because I did not have the kind of training that I'd had. I certainly had not built up experience in the business side.
Right.
And so, but I thought, okay, let's say the worst happens and I can't make this work. My other credentials are not going to be diminished by it.
Right.
I still have proven myself as an ability to report, to write, to edit, to be a journalism manager, so I can go back and it won't be the same. It is risky, but I trusted myself and I trusted my gut, and I really had to work hard to understand and get comfortable with this idea of trade-offs, that one wasn't going to be all good and one wasn't going to be all bad. I would have to make sacrifices to take the new job, and I would also have to make sacrifices if I decided to stay where I was. And when I would get frustrated by the new job, I would go, but why did you do this?
Yeah.
These 5 things, are you getting those 5 things? And usually the answer was I was getting 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah. But it was your choice.
But it was my choice, and it's not always. I know many people don't have the luxury of it being their choice. But I always think you can look for something it gives you, whether it gives you more freedom, whether it gives you a way to learn new things. Had I understood when I was offered this job how little I knew about business, I'm not sure I would have had the courage to do it. But once having leapt into that situation, I wasn't going to let myself, I was going to just work harder. And every day of the first year, I was exhausted in a way I had not been. Even though I actually spent fewer hours in the office in the new job, I was just learning something.
Like using a new muscle.
I was using a totally new muscle, and I was no longer an expert. Everybody around me knew more than I knew.
Would you tell someone listening or watching this to do it?
Oh, I would absolutely say to do it. And the more senior I became, the more work I did on Sundays and Mondays. So I was working a lot.
Yeah.
When I moved to the business side, because when news happens, you have to respond to it. It doesn't really matter what time of day it is. It doesn't really matter what other plans you have to do it. When I moved to the business side, it was a little bit more 9 to 5.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, it wasn't really 9 to 5. It became sort of, I'd like to go in a little later. So for me, it was more like 9:30, usually to 7:30 or something like that. But if I had more flexibility, and I valued that.
Yeah.
I said, yes, maybe it's not cool. Maybe I didn't talk to a president today. Maybe I didn't do something really fun or know the inside scoop of something that was happening. But I got to have a slightly different personal life.
And they may be pre-contemplation. They may be thinking, I'm tired of this job. I might lose my job. I might be in an industry where I'm not going to have a job in 10 years, but I still need to earn money, which, by the way, jobs are an exchange of your time for their money. So that's a perfectly okay way to look at it.
That's right.
What would you tell someone listening to this who, for whatever reason, can't quite pull the plug or can't quite do it? What would you tell them? How should they approach the planning, the evaluation, the decision making? What would you tell them to do?
Do as much research as you possibly can. So if you're in one of those situations where you're thinking, I might not want to do this for that much longer, I don't like this company, or I don't particularly work well with this particular supervisor, begin to talk to as many people as you can talk to in as informal a way as you can. You don't have to tell them what you're doing. Just find out what other people do. Explore as many places, as many ideas, as many things. You learn so much by talking to your friends, your colleagues. Find out what their cousins do. Find out what the neighbor down the street that you've never talked to very much. Just use it as a research project and then see what sparks your interest. And all of us have different ways of making decisions, but you might think about writing down, this is what I'm really good at. This is what I really enjoy. And sometimes what you're really good at is not what you really enjoy, but you want a combination of both because you want to offer the company what you're really good at. And if you enjoy it, all the better. But you want to make sure you're giving a combination. For yourself, you're being honest about those things.
When you went from journalism to management, did you have to upskill or did you learn on the job?
Both. I immediately did some training. I did an executive training program of about a week or two at the University of Virginia at the Darden Business School.
Yeah.
And then after I had been in a business role for 3 years, Don Graham said to me, he asked me a business question, and I said, I'll go check with the CFO and let you know. And I saw the look in his eyes was, I could have asked the CFO if I wanted the CFO to give me the answer. But he went on for a long time in the meeting, and we did other work, and we talked about other things. And at the end of it, he said, Ann, you're better at this than I thought you might be. But you still have things to learn. And if you want to go get some more training, we'll invest in you and we'll send you to get that training. So then I went and did a much more extensive executive business program so that I really learned a lot more about what's going on. I was lucky. I had a company willing to stand behind me and to be generous and to help me do that. Even if you don't have that, there's so many courses available. I find that when I watch television shows like Shark Tank or some of the other things that are on PBS and other business shows, you can learn a lot by reading books about business, success in business, failures in business, watching television and thinking about how do entrepreneurs think, how do innovators think. It's not it's not a prescription for you of how to do it, but you can be inspired from all kinds of different things. So I think you have to put yourself in those, figure out what is it I have available to me, and then make the most of it.
I know you coach people, just people that you know, people that have worked for you. If you were to coach someone, and this is a tough situation, but let's say you have someone who is at the end of what they've been doing for whatever reason. The business is out of business, the industry is falling apart. They are very discouraged. They are dealing with issues of depression. They are dealing with issues of, I don't look the way I once did. I'm older. I've got, and they're kind of overwhelmed.
Right.
Where do you start when you're coaching someone like that?
Well, I think you start by focusing on how did I have the success that I had? What did I like about what I did? What did I do well? So you focus on some of the positive. Then you also focus on what kind of resources do I have available to me. If I don't look particularly good or I don't feel strong or something, am I doing enough? Should I be taking a walk every day?
Yeah.
What kinds of things can I add to my agenda to help me look after me?
That's a really good point.
If I have an opportunity to see a therapist and to talk about these problems, whether it be a social worker or a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a pastor at your church or all kinds of different people. Job counselor, right. Go talk to somebody about what it is and then set small goals for yourself. This week I'm going to just try to learn about 5 new jobs that interest me. Or I'm going to read up so I can better understand this kind of opportunity. I'm going to spend hours each day looking at different websites that list jobs and seeing what are people need, what is available, that kind of thing. I think it is overwhelming if you try to do everything on the first day.
And research shows that if people do those things, they start to get energized.
Right.
But the more you don't do them and the more you fail, the harder it is to get back up.
Absolutely. And the more you try to do it alone,
Good point.
It's hard.
Yeah.
You need social contact. You need to hear what other people say about things. And by just not focusing so much necessarily on yourself, but reaching out and saying, what do you do?
Yeah.
Like, What's your job? And how do you stay sane doing that job? And what makes it worthwhile to you?
Yeah.
Why do you go every morning?
Yeah.
What makes it good? And I think you can often find things that just surprise you.
Yeah.
I couldn't have told you. If somebody had said to me, maybe as short as 5 years before I made the switch from journalism to business, but certainly 10 years ahead, if somebody had said, this is how your career is going to go, I would have thought, they are so out of it. They have no idea who I am. They don't know that.
So you changed over time too.
I changed, but I also I came to understand myself better. I came, once people start to present, so once you open yourself up to other ideas,
Exactly.
suddenly things that you think could be incredibly boring or harder than you can manage or just different, something you might not like, you might, as I talk to people, I thought, well, that sounds kind of curious.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun. That's
I know
kind of
someone
interesting.
who we're going to interview on this series who volunteered into an executive director role.
It's
She started volunteering and she started moving up, and the next thing, executive director, and she wasn't heading for that. She
Right.
just needed something to do after she lost her first career.
Volunteering is an excellent way to find out what things are really like, to make a contribution to your community, which often makes you feel better, to network and meet new people, to fill your days with
Get you out of the
something
house.
that's interesting, right? Get you out of the house.
Exactly.
So I think volunteering is really good. Sometimes, was it Dustin Hoffman who did the movie? No, it was Bob De Niro who did the movie of The Intern. I doubt there are too many companies who hire the 60-something-year-old intern, but there might be companies that are looking for people to mentor, to do projects with, to do those kinds of things. How do you get involved either on a volunteer basis or on a paid basis? I have a friend who had been a stay-at-home mother for a very long time, wanted to go back into the workplace. And one of the things I said is, start volunteering. Start going out. So you will have things to say on your resume
Exactly.
that will show your skills. I also encouraged her strongly to show how being a mother was relevant to what she wanted to do. Now, she wanted to work in the schools, so it was a particularly easy thing to do. But motherhood and fatherhood and those kinds of things, everything you do in your life can be a skill that you're developing that can be useful to a company or to a startup or to a public service situation. Or
So I only have two more questions.
what should I talk about the 5-year plan?
Yeah, tell me about the 5-year plan.
Good. At the middle of or near the end of my journalism career, I was
Start that again.
Yes.
Just because you muddled it, and if we're starting it clean, let's start it.
Let's start.
okay. Near the end of my journalism career, an outside editor offered me a big opportunity, something that seemed like a very good job, but it was at a new publication, and there was a lot of risk associated with it. And I was really tempted. And when I went to talk to my boss at Newsweek about it, he said, "Why would you do this? You seem pretty happy here." And I said, "Well, I am happy here, but I can't figure out what my 5-year plan is." And he said, well, 5 years ago, if I had told you that you would have grown in these ways, you would have had these new opportunities, you would be up for these kinds of jobs, what would you have said to me?" And I said, "I would have said you were crazy." And he said, "Okay, the next 5 years has the promise of being every bit as good for you. And you need to have ideas about what you're going to do and what you're trying, but you need to keep your ears open and your eyes open and see opportunity when it comes along." And he thought, and he was right, he said, "This is the wrong opportunity for you. You're jumping because you're scared about not feeling certain about what the next 5 years is like. You've made a lot out of the last 5 years."
And so add a place for serendipity.
Add a place for serendipity. And if you have a plan, which I had a general
Yeah,
idea of what I wanted to happen, always stay attuned to what else is happening around me that might make my plan, might create opportunities for an even better plan.
Yes.
Because I think sometimes you get wedded to your plan.
Yeah.
And I think some of the people who said to me, "Why are you going to do something so different? Why would you do that? That's crazy."
Yeah.
we're saying, well, that wasn't part of your plan. Like, none of us planned to make that kind of thing. Why in the world would you do that? And having had that conversation with him a couple of years earlier, I was thinking, because I think this is an opportunity. I think this could be different. I think this could be interesting. And if it's bad, I'll hopefully find a way out, but I'll also remember that the situation I was in wasn't perfect. There was a reason I wanted to leave. There was a reason I wanted to think about something different.
Also, the 5-year plan is a great way to start. But you get in the middle of a 5-year plan and something in your plan doesn't go well. There's an obstacle and all of a sudden you're devastated. And I look back at the times in my life when that happened, and at first I thought that was really a disaster. And then I look back and I dodged a bullet, or I ended up something that was so much better. So that the other problem, I have a plan, but getting wedded to it can really be defeating.
Yes, and sometimes you don't know what others' plans for you are, meaning you're working in a company. There was a job I very much wanted in journalism, and I didn't get it. Within Newsweek, and I didn't get it. And I couldn't understand. I was perfectly qualified for this job, and the person who got it, frankly, I didn't think was as well qualified for this job. And everybody was beating around the bush with me, and I kept trying to understand why I didn't get this. And about 6 months later, the editor said to me, I have a new job to offer you, and I had something else in mind for you. I think you'd be even better and a more valuable asset at this.
Did you feel like saying you could have told me?
I actually did. And he said, no, I couldn't.
You couldn't have.
Because there were other people in the roles. I had to see if the dominoes would fall. And he said, if you hadn't started that other job, you wouldn't have had the opportunity for this one. We couldn't have pulled you out. It was too prominent a job. But now here's another opportunity. Exactly. So sometimes opportunities present themselves by serendipity. Sometimes they're plans that you don't understand. Right. And after a while, I just said, okay, they didn't pick me for that. I have to assume that I will be able to make it into something else. I'll find something that works for me. And fortunately, I didn't jump too fast, and they came back with something that they were absolutely right, was a better job, fit my skills better, and allowed the growth I've seen, allowed me to have much more success than the job I wanted would have.
One other theme that I hear through this, though, is in every job you had, liked part of it, didn't like part of it,
Absolutely.
You were also delivering. I mean, there was a part of you that was working long hours, working diligently, right. Doing some things you wanted to do, other things you didn't necessarily want to do,
right.
But they would get you where you wanted to go. So
right.
There also, through all of the planning and the thought process, there was a piece of you that was just really delivering on the work.
Absolutely. And I am a strong believer that you don't do just what's in your job description. You're constantly thinking about, how can I do more? How can I deliver more? Now that suits my own desire because I'm always curious and nosy and I want to know what's going on in other places. So it wasn't just me being selfless and trying to be a great employee. I would get this down pat and then I wanted to move on and try to figure out something else. So that suited my personality. But I absolutely, were there days I didn't deliver? Yes. Were there days that when I was disappointed by the decision they made? And frankly, when I didn't get this job and I got assigned to another job that I really didn't want to do, I looked around. But I'm so glad I didn't jump. I kept thinking, well, that's not really any better. So I took my time and I really I looked for opportunity and then allowed an opportunity to occur too. But all the time, more days than not, I really tried to work hard and do better. And, anybody who did an honest evaluation of my work would have plenty of things to say I didn't do very well. Fortunately, they'd have a few things to say I did quite well too.
Exactly, and nobody's perfect, right? I mean, part of it is that's part of the learning process.
That's
always
right.
Something to learn.
That's right.
In the workplace.
That's right, and always being eager to learn and wanting to learn.
Yes.
That's the biggest failure. I see age discrimination come about more often when people are set in their ways. This is how we've always done it. This is how we do it. Who does that young whippersnapper think she is? Why would we do it like that? The way the media business has changed over the years, technology has disrupted, particularly the print media business, which I was involved with primarily, has disrupted everything. I mean, technology has disrupted everything about print. And I saw a lot of people fail, not because they weren't capable of doing it, just because they didn't want to or they were scared. And I think today, 10 years later, if I asked 10 of them, if you could go back, would you do it differently? At least 8 of them would say, oh yeah, I would have embraced new things. I would have tried to learn differently because it didn't turn out to be such a bad outcome.
Right.
But they were afraid and they were set in their ways and they didn't realize that part of having a long career in a workplace, whatever your career is, whether you change it or stay with it, is changing, because every business changes, and particularly in a time of such huge technological change in our country and in the world.
Yes, and I have a little thought on older people and technology, which is if a 3-year-old can learn how to use it, why can't older people?
That's right.
So.
And one of the real failures in our training, and we have to look as a country at more ways to do this. We just don't provide. The reason 3-year-olds learn how to do it is because it's all around them every day, and because their parents are doing it, and then they get exposed to it in school, and then it doesn't happen, particularly for people who are older. Yeah. They don't have it. Their own children are doing it. They're getting exasperated with them. They're not. There aren't very good classes that are just beginning classes, but look for them.
And there also are stereotypes. If I see one more grandparent trying to turn on a Skype or a Facebook, it's like, oh, please. They've learned how to do that by now.
Yes.
So, okay, I have one more question. Let's see if I want to ask it this way. So you've made these changes. You're now 2 years in. How long have you been doing this?
I've been doing
new
consulting
role?
now for 3 years.
For 3 years. Are you glad you did it?
Very glad I did it. There are many more ups and downs in it. My days are not as consistent and scheduled, so I need to meet other people's demands more. I don't have quite as much autonomy, but I also have more free time. And I think more because I'm not an operator, I'm more an advisor. And that requires you to know how to stand back and again to listen to people and to learn. So it's been a huge learning process for me. There have been days I've been bored because there wasn't enough to do, and there have been days I've been completely overwhelmed because at that moment came way too much to do. And sometimes as an outsider and a consultant, you can't say, well, I'm sorry, I'll come in tomorrow and finish it. No, they need it tonight. They need to get it done. So there's lots of things I've had to change, but I don't regret it in the least because it's been a new experience and it's been fun. And I've learned a lot, and I've found new fun things. I've met new people by doing different things. You and I met because I joined a nonprofit board, a board that I would not have had time to do as a journalist. I simply didn't have the time. So my life has expanded in a fun way.
Last question. Best moment, worst moment?
Of transitions? I think it's hard to identify. There have been a lot of good moments and a lot of not so good moments. I think the worst moment was about a week after I moved from journalism to business. I had been in business meetings the whole week, but I was going to sell some stock I had in the company. And I had called the broker and asked to sell the stock. And the general counsel of the company called me and was just screaming, "What do you think you're doing? You can't sell that stock. You were in that meeting. You have insider information. You can't do that." And I sat there and I said to her, I can't win because either you're going to assume I'm a crook or you're going to have to believe what the truth is. And that is, I didn't understand a word anybody said at that meeting. So there may have been insider information presented to me. I didn't know what anybody was talking about. I was so new. Needless to say, I didn't sell the stock. I learned quickly, but I was horribly humiliated. And I can laugh about it now, and I even laughed about it then. But that was, what that brought home is just 5 days into the new job, I was like, oh my gosh, what made me think I could do this? So that was one of the worst moments. The best moment that happened for me were the moments where I realized I was making a contribution, where I realized and it was often not my boss who said, he often praised me, but it was when my peers would come and say, thank you for doing that, or you made a real difference, or I wasn't willing to stand up for that cause and you were. And I appreciate that. So as I earned the admiration of the people I so respected, that was the best part for me. And it didn't diminish the times where they didn't agree with me or didn't respect me, which were all for good. I mean, they all were justified in what they did. But when I could see that I had gone from really knowing nothing to actually making significant contributions, made me feel great. But it took, I would say, none of that started to happen for at least a year into the job. And it wasn't until 18 months, 2 years. And then it became more as I became better at what I did. And as I also realized there were certain things I was never going to learn. I just wasn't going to be good at certain things. And in a company, often you have a general counsel who's going to be the expert on the law, and a CFO who's going to be an expert on the numbers, and a CEO who's going to be an expert in certain things. And if you can learn the language and learn the questions, you don't have to know every bit of all the detail. And when I realized that, and realized I could make a contribution without being able to do everybody's job, I just had to do my own, that was really helpful.
But what's really great, I love that question. What's really great about that, and part of Job IQ, is to say to people, it's about joy and meaning and making a difference, because that's really what people,
that's right.
You do need to get paid, but the intrinsic gratification is the team, the relationships, and the sense that you're valued.
And that you're making a difference.
And that you're making a difference.
That the value, it's worthy. You're worthy of value.
Yes.
And they are coming to see you in that way.
Yes.
I think and so when you start that process and when you start asking yourself, what do you want to do? Think about, how could I add value? And then you might find yourself in a position like I did, which was, I thought I knew how I would add value, but when I got there, I realized, oh my gosh, I didn't really understand what this was like at all. So it took longer than I expected, and I had to work harder than I expected. I had to learn a lot more new things. But fundamentally, what I was good at was still what I was good at. And I came to know enough that I could add value to that new environment.
I'm actually going to cut myself out of this, but I will say that one of the things we're doing is the Finding Your Strengths, the Gallup Strength Finder. Mm-hmm. And the whole theory of that is play to your strengths. Don't try to fix your weaknesses.
Right.
Play to your strengths.
Right.
To me also, and this I might keep in, but to me, where you feel like you're in a dead-end job is where you don't feel you're making a difference.
That's right.
Where no one will listen to you, where they let the hotel clerk say, I'm going to comp you $50 for dinner because you're not happy. That gives the hotel, they give that person meaning for their job. They can help people.
Right.
Instead of saying it's hotel policy, we can't help you.
Right.
So it's making a difference is really, and you can do that at any level in any job.
You can and should feel like you're doing that at any level in any job. But don't be discouraged if you don't make a difference for a little period of time.
Right.
Because there are going to be periods of time in every job I've ever had.
Yes. Well, you're also planting seeds, and you don't look for the seed to grow up the next day.
That's right. That's exactly right. There was a situation where I had what I thought was a really great idea very soon after I was in the business job. And I presented it to the people senior to me who it would be relevant to. And they scoffed at it. They said, you just don't understand. About a year later, when the business had changed in just the way that from some previous experience I could see that they couldn't see, they came to me with exactly the same idea that I had presented to them. I didn't say.
I said, do they remember it was your idea?
No, they didn't remember. But they literally come into my office. I turned around. Behind me on my desk was a file that had all the things from that. I pulled out and started saying, yes, this would work in these different ways. And I remember these two guys looking at each other going, how did she have all this figured out already? And I smiled. When once I became more secure,
Yeah.
I would have said, well, because I mentioned this a year ago and you didn't. I wasn't quite, it was a little too early
Yeah.
for me to do that at
Yeah.
that point. But as you say, I planted a seed. I was discouraged when they looked at me and told me I just didn't get it. But in fact, I actually had seen something they couldn't see. I didn't get feedback on that for a year. But a year later, I realized I made a contribution.
And one of the other things, and then I really, but one of the other things is as more senior people are working with people that are chronologically younger, learning to understand that they have ideas and that we sometimes defer to them, sometimes they defer to us, but that we don't always have the right answers. And
Absolutely
that's
true.
big.
And younger people or newer people to the company are often like our customers. They're like, if we're providing services, if we're providing widgets, if we're providing this, different people who come in, everyone is similar to somebody who's in the marketplace, who you're trying ultimately in what you do to reach, to please, to whatever it is that your job you're providing. So when you scoff at people like that, and certainly there are times where, you know, a younger person comes in and you just roll their eyes hearing what they're saying, they're probably also telling you something that's changing in the marketplace.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching Job IQ Career Outside the Box. You can subscribe below and you can check out lots of information on our website. See you soon. Take care.